my rights away.
In your book, Mr. Mancham, you never once mentioned the POA.
In my view, he also fell under the spell and influence of Rene. When Rene gave power to Michel, he thought that Michel would be Chitutu. Yes, well, Seychelles let Mandela down, saying that I was an international playboy, when we all know that Mr. Rene himself has been a bigger playboy in the association than me. Except, of course, I was playing on the international stage. He was playing in the kitchen yard, you see. That this was not a coup of Mr. Rene against the Mancham government. It was a coup of Mr. Rene against his own government.
The faster I will run.
Welcome to a new edition of Seychelles ANNOU KOZE. Today we have come to pay a visit to Sir James Mancham at Glassy, at his residence. Mr. Mancham, welcome on our program.
Thank you so much.
We're having this special program today in relation to the launching of his new book, Seychelles, the Saga of a Small Nation Navigating the Cross Currents of a Big World. Mr. Mancham has published before, but this one is a very interesting one, and I would recommend everyone to have a read. My first question for you, Mr. Mancham. A very interesting and something I have never heard before was regarding the French ambassador's involvement in the coup d'etat in 1977. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yes, this is a story, if you want, which is privy to me, and very few people have heard about it. And if one was to be interested in power, then you avoid sometimes having to reveal the truth as it is. But at 75, I feel that I have a duty to posterity to expose certain situations which took place, which wasn't entirely transparent. Now, there was a French involvement at ambassador level in relation to the coup d'etat in Seychelles. For one, when the coup d'etat, when we celebrated our independence, the French sent a very high-powered delegation to Seychelles. And as president, of course, I was looking after the delegation from all of the nations. But a little group of Seychellois, the clique which called themselves the Franco-Seychellois, they conspired together and they put a lot of attention on the French delegation. It so happened that soon after we had celebrated independence, the French government called back to Paris the chargé d'affaires, Mr. Boyer, who had been conducting himself rationally, ethically, in the discharge of his position as chargé d'affaires of France and Seychelles. And it was announced that a gentleman by the name of de PRODUCED would be arriving, that his name was associated with Prale Island. His family came from the family which gave the name of Prale to the island of Prale. Now we know for a fact that from the moment Mr. President de Prale arrived in Seychelles, that he was very, very much part of the entourage of that little Franco-Seychellois clique. Well, the story is a long story. It's very well, if you want, detailed in the book under the chapter of Franco-Seychelles relation. And it would reveal the part which the French government, maybe not the government, but certain agents of the government played or contributed towards the coup d'etat, to such an extent that You see, I felt very betrayed. Why? Because I had been invited by John de Gaulle myself to come to France, had been well received. I was the one who led the motion to make French second language in the country officially. The French government had decorated me, the Legion d'Honneur, etc. However, to some people, I was James Richard, and Monsieur René was France Albert, and it sounded as if behind this French involvement there was a little bit of anti sort of British sentiments, because also at that time I had been, if you want, projecting the philosophy of Seychelles remaining attached to the United Kingdom. So I was deemed to be far more Anglophone than Francophone. But I do recommend anybody interested to know more about the details of the story to make sure that you get a copy of the book. And it's a very interesting story, and few people know really about it, and I think therefore you've been very wise to come up with this as your first question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. My second question. In your book, you say that one of the reasons Mr. René organized the coup was that he disapproved of your lifestyle, his greed and lust for power. It seems you are still a bit bitter towards him. Is that right?
If anybody could be bitter, it would be me. I'm not by nature a bitter person. I have returned to Seychelles in 1993, and I returned as a post of national reconciliation, and I've had a lot of discussion even afterwards with René, who staged the coup, because in fact I wanted to, if you want to give Mr. René a way out in terms of the treasonable behavior, because many people don't realize one thing, that this was not a coup of Mr. René against the Mancham government. It was a coup of Mr. René against his own government. Because to all intents and purposes, Mr. René was my Prime Minister. If you're my Prime Minister and you don't agree with my policy, then you resign and you go for election. But Mr. René dined with me, he saw me over at the airport, and next day he makes the coup. And for 1 year, they were the coalition government. The coalition was working so well, and there was no indication at all that Mr. René was unhappy or discontented with any aspect of the policy which we were following. But not by nature, I've tried to understand where it comes from, and history now reveals and shows, after you read his book, Ferrari's book, Michel's book, that there was, Michel René wanted power, right? And even after he got power, one would have expected him to, well, now I'm in control, I'm going to behave, you know, in a democratic way, in a responsible way. But what did we see? He wanted to impose on the people of Seychelles his so-called revolution, which has disturbed the country upside down, so that even now today we are struggling to be able to get back to the good old days, you know. Mr. René went out of his way to try and justify the coup d'etat, saying I was selling them to Arabs, saying that I was an international playboy, when we all know that Mr. René himself has been a bigger playboy in the East of Seychelles than me. Except, of course, I was playing on the international stage. He was playing in the kitchen yard, you see. But deep inside, I have never been a fellow who has nurtured hate for anybody. Because I tried to understand and gave a way out by suggesting after I returned that both René and I had been educated at the time of the Cold War and were influenced by the two currents of ideology then prevailing. And none of us was really educated how to navigate the ship of state throughout the troublesome and confusing period of the Cold War. So Mr. Rene, he became convinced that communism was the right way, and my tendency was towards free enterprise and capitalism, so we were set apart. So I thought that by putting forward his explanation, then that would enable him now to rise up and to turn a new leaf. But we saw that after we had lost the first election and Mr. Rene was still ruling, that he adopted the policy of plus ça va, plus c'est la même chose, and that we dragged along with the one-party state mentality, one-party regime mentality, with Mr. Rene behaving as if he's an absolute ruler and owner of the country. This was sad.
And you further stated also that all aspects of Rene's revolutions were failures.
Exactly.
From NYS to SMB to hotel ownership by the government. Can you elaborate?
Well, I mean, this is a fact. I mean, in his pursuit of trying to bring socialism to Seychelles, Mr. Rene first created the SMB, State Marketing Board, at the expense of people of my own family who were business, import and export. Overnight after the coup d'etat, my family was refused a license to carry on business as a chief chandler, a license which my father had held for 60 years, license sticker. Suddenly, my family was refused the license to import cheese. We had been the importer of Kraft cheese, the agent for Kraft cheese. How can you stop somebody who's been importing and distributing something like Kraft cheese for 50 years, so then you say, we deny you a license to import cheese? Then they went to my brother and he would say, in our socialist society, if you import whiskey, you cannot import brandy. Now which one do you choose? And my brother said, well, we'll take whiskey. And 3 months later, they would come to them and say, now social society, you cannot be the agent of Dewar's White Label, VAT 69, Johnny Walker, Chivas Regal. You got to choose one. When my mother chose one, the whole rest then was absorbed by assembly. That showed you the nature, of this. But all these have been corrupted. All this principle of collectivity, cooperative, And then we had the youth league. Then they went to Cuba, and there Fidel Castro had taken an island to educate through propaganda a new generation to be able to adhere to his Marxist tenet, to his Marxist ideology. Rene came back to Seychelles and started the NYS and took away the influence of the churches over the schools. It was a big fiasco. So when we returned, there was public anger, and one of the first things which we succeeded to get the government to abandon was that youth service, whatever you want to call it. So that also was a failure. And things speak for themselves, and we know that his overall philosophy, see, one of the big disservices which Mr. Rene played against the interests of tourism was to go out of his way in order to justify the coup, also to try and get the support of the mass of the people by playing this color politics. forgetting the fact that if there was anybody who came from really white source, it was himself. Now he went to remind the people something which they had forgotten, that they came from slaves. And he did it in such a way that a lot of people started to equate service with servitude, meaning that they, whenever they would face tourists, they did so half-heartedly, without realizing that today you go to Italy, to France, people are serving you on national, through friendship to Italian. There's nothing wrong giving service. But having brought back all these politics of slavery, made people think that we are still serving these white tourists, and that was a very, very negative, and it takes quite a while to be able to bring back that sort of disposition which should exist in the country if we are going to have successful tourism. We can have a most beautiful country in the world, but if the inhabitants are hostile to the visitor or not happy with themselves and indicate bitterness on their face, etc., well, this doesn't make for a great tourism destination.
I am looking for freedom.